Hello everyone, and welcome back to Jurassic World Evolution 2. We're continuing our Jurassic Difficulty Challenge Mode playthrough on Germany. This is part 5, and we're starting off with finally getting some of our genome for the Mosasaurus. By the end of the episode, we will release a Mosasaurus into one of the lagoons. And we'll also finally get to 4 stars, and we basically have our, hopefully, final paddock built and ready for Therizinosaurus in the final episode. Unfortunately, I spoke a little too soon last episode. The Tylosaurus decides to hunt down a couple of Plesiosaurus during this episode, that being the first of them. Unfortunately, because the gene modification is turned off for Germany, I can't really do anything to prevent this. And I basically built the habitat for them to cohabitate for appeal reasons, so unfortunately we'll just have to release more Plesiosaurus to accommodate that. Here we're just sending out more expeditions for mosasaur fossils. It actually took several expeditions. I don't show all of them for the sake of keeping the episode brief, but I at least took 4 expeditions to get 100% genome. Right here we have unlocked the wide luxury pathway, or the main thoroughfare luxury pathway, so we're just upgrading our path since that has a factor to play in how many guests are able to be in the park. The top part of the island is going to be our double Therizinosaurus paddock, and it needs power, so I just needed to put one more power station a little closer to it. Looks like we're putting in a few more Apatosaurus. I put in a few more Apatosaurus, as well as by the end of this episode we will have replaced all of the Struthiomimus with Polacanthus, so I believe I made this enclosure a little bit bigger and put it in some more tall leaf and ground leaf for the additional herbivores. Once we get the Mosasaurus and eventually the Therizinosaurus into the park, I am anticipating that this area up here is going to be very busy with guests, so I was putting down a hotel in advance. And then afterwards, I think we're just incubating or synthesizing some more Apatosaurus. Right here, I'm researching the Extra Scientist research upgrade, so we can tag an Extra Scientist into any research that costs a lot, which is very helpful later with the Therizinosaurus. And then here, I am just quickly building the gyrosphere ride for the Therizinosaurus enclosure, which, like I said, that's going to be in next episode, but I had some extra time in between expeditions, so I figured I would go ahead and put down the gyrosphere path. Okay, so there's a bit going on in this clip. First of all, I researched the storm defense options. So I went and put that on several buildings just to prevent having to repair them all the time. Storms seem to be fairly frequent on this island. And then next, I released a couple more Muttaburrasaurus just because we had room in that paddock, and we are eventually probably going to need to squeeze out as many dinosaurs as we can. And then down here, like I alluded to earlier, most of our initial batch of Struthiomimus started to die off from old age, and I unfortunately had to just tranquilize and sell the rest of them so that we could make room for the new dinosaurs, the Polacanthus. And here it looks like we've got another storm coming in, so let's see how this one goes. Thankfully, the storm wasn't too bad, and we were able to continue with Mosasaurus. I do believe that is our last fossil to get to 100% genome, and then I moved on to excavating for Polacanthus and sending out more expeditions for Polacanthus. Alright, it's time to incubate our first Mosasaurus. Thankfully, I have plenty of the scientist's skills needed to incubate one. Unfortunately, the first one had the needy trait, and I was worried that the 5-piece lagoon would not be big enough, so I had to discard this one. And then on the second Mosasaurus, I believe I had aggressive and large appetite, so I kept that one because I think the needy trait might mean it needs more space to be happy. And next, getting Polacanthus to 100% was pretty easy, so it's time to incubate our first batch of Polacanthus as well. Here I'm gonna do something I should have done much sooner, but on the Germany map, you are limited to one staff center, which limits the number of scientists you can have, but there's an upgrade to increase staff center capacity, and that lets you hire 2 more scientists, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. And we are going to need all of the skill points we can to research and send expeditions out for the Therizinosaurus. The Therizinosaurus takes a ton of research points to unlock, and I needed to even research more training just to have enough points to research Therizinosaurus. So with the extra scientists and the upgraded training points, I finally have enough. And as you can see, even with cheaper research, it still was a very hefty price tag to research Therizinosaurus. So I do think it's worth it because supposedly they are a ton of appeal and you can have a bunch of them together, but it was quite the endeavor to research them. And here we have our first Polacanthus. I wanted to keep an eye on them and make sure that they are happy in the enclosure. I wasn't sure if they would be upset because there's 2 other species in there with them, but they ended up being perfectly happy. They're pretty easy, not too picky, and they like ground leaf, which goes well with the Nasutoceratops, which also likes ground leaf. And here we have our next storm, so let's see how this one goes. So another storm, not too bad, nothing too crazy. That Nasutoceratops could have escaped if it wasn't sleeping. And right here I'm just adding a couple upgrades to the Therizinosaurus paddock for next episode, and it's time to release our Mosasaurus. So one thing you may notice is that despite having 1 out of 1 for the shark, it's not completely comfortable. I have a feeling that might be related to the big appetite gene that it acquired. So later on I just put in a second shark feeder and that gets it to 100% comfort. Here I'm just putting down a second viewing tower. The Mosasaurus has a ton of appeal, and I wanted to make sure that it's basically 100% of the time being viewed by guests, and there was a chunk of the lagoon that wasn't being viewed by guests. Unfortunately, Tylosaurus claimed another Plesiosaurus, so it was time to incubate another one. You can also see I kind of highlighted with my mouse down there that we are down to only one more species left for the park, so that is going to be the Therizinosaurus. And here I'm just checking up on Polacanthus to make sure they're comfortable, which they are. And here we go, we are sending out... Oh, well, not yet. I was just double checking. The Therizinosaurus likes ground leaf, so I went ahead and prepared their enclosure with a bunch of ground leaf around it. Alright, so let's conclude this episode with extracting our first batch of Therizinosaurus DNA. Hopefully by the next episode we can get the Therizinosaurus to 100% genome, and we can have a whole bunch of them at that top paddock in the park, and that will get us to 5 stars. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.